The subject of the Enlightenment, that echoes rumbles on. In a recent article, Etienne Balibar, like Moss, sees 1989 and the Declaration of the Rights of Man as marking the ruptural emergence of a radically new category of subjectivity. A category which only makes sense in terms of the revolutionary citizen. Although the Declaration proclaims the rights of man, Balibar sees them as being really the rights of man as citizen. The objective of the Declaration is the constitution of citizenship, but now a citizenship that demands not absolute loyalty and obedience to the monarch's subjection, but a new capacity for self-determined agency, subjectification, and so new forms of intersubjective and intrasubjective relationships. Democratic sovereignty requires a symbolic equality of all citizens, because all citizens are the nominal source of its authority, as well as being subject to that authority. The sovereign equality of democratic authority thus institutes citizenship as a certain kind of freedom, and anchors this liberty not in a relationship to God, but in the nature of man. The privileged civic freedoms and equality of antiquity, embodied in rights and roles granted by law, give way to an understanding of equality and freedom as natural and universal. When Rousseau proclaims that man was born free and everywhere he is in chains, he is asserting that freedom and equality are innate attributes whose denial is not only an injustice, but an affront to nature. The symbolic order of rights and the modern sense of a self embodied in an inner voice of nature are each a condition of the other's existence. So the question ceases to be, as it would have been in ancient Rome, and continues to be in the formulation of nationality laws and immigration policies. Who is the citizen, or who are citizens? For Balibar, concerned with the production of subjectivity, the question now is, who is the citizen? The answer is, the citizen is a man in enjoyment of all his natural rights, completely realizing his individual humanity, a free man simply because he is equal to every other man. This answer, or this new question in the form of an answer, will also be stated after the fact. The citizen is the subject. The citizen is always a supposed subject, legal subject, psychological subject, transcendental subject. By a different, more historical route, Balibar reaches the same conclusion as Zizek. The citizen is the cogito, the citizen is the subject, but Balibar's gloss on this pure, non-substantial subjectivity emphasizes less its emptiness than its perennial deferral. The citizen is always becoming a subject, devenir sujet. The possibility of action is now mediated through a new sense of primordial but incomplete self. The sense of a self is need of completion that is manifested in a psychic life of need, desire, and guilt. To be a person now entails the remorseless aspiration to self-knowledge, self-expression, and self-fulfillment. The status, the rights, and the responsibilities of citizenship come to be experienced as somehow constitutive of a sense of self as subjective. But to repeat, they are not experienced or recognized as as an identity. On the contrary, it is the traumatic lack of fit between the impulses of a supposed inner nature and the demands of an external reality, their necessary non-identity, that produces the characteristically modern sense of the self as divided and incomplete. Schiller's On the Aesthetic Education of Man, 1991, for example, articulates the romantic conception of the split as an opposition between natural feeling and all divining intellect. It was civilization itself which imposed this wound upon modern man. Once the increase of empirical knowledge and more exact modes of thought made sharper divisions between the sciences inevitable, and once the increasingly complex machinery of state necessitated a more rigorous separation on ranks and occupations, then the inner unity of human nature was severed too, and a disastrous conflict set its harmonious powers at variance. At first sight, this may sit oddly with Balibar's definition of citizen subject as a person completely realizing his individual humanity. Remember, though, that Balibar sees this not as an achieved state of holiness, but as the process of unendingly becoming a subject. That superficially paradoxical notion of the subject becoming subject is vital. Taking up a position within the symbolic because it is to occupy a necessarily empty position, which makes it possible to articulate needs and desire, always entails a sense of loss. It produces the sense of subjectivity as lack that motivates the compulsion to heal the wound of modern culture, the drive to recreate a harmony or fullness that feel as though they must once have existed. If you want to hear that foundational myth of modern selfhood voiced with unrivaled vivacity and paranoid conviction, then you need only listen to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau, above all, proclaimed the self to be the locus of primordial nature. Once subjugated to society, but guided by a conscience which still speaks to us in the language of nature. That voice, he believed, can all too easily be drowned out by the noise of society, and especially by the babble and chatter of the city. The least worst city will therefore be the one which allows the nearest alignment of its codified principles of justice, law, to the demands of nature consciousness. It will allow a degree of authenticity in interpersonal relations without disavowing the necessary transformation of the natural self entitled by the subject's entry into society. The artifice and theatricality of the city were to be deplored because they were incompatible with this striving from subjective authenticity. Not only did they lead to the corruption of morals and culture, mores, They were against nature. The question for politics was not just how to arbitrate between the public good and self-hedonism, but given the intractable conflict between nature and society, how to create good citizens. In making the link between the public codes and conducts of cities and the subjective repertoire of action and self-understanding available to citizens, Rousseau was one of the most perceptive early theories of modern urbanism as well as modern politics. Yet, he despised the cosmopolitanism of Paris and the way that here people disguised their true nature as a matter of course. He could not stand the impossibility of knowing for sure who is a citizen and who is a man about town. The men to whom one speaks are not at all those with whom one communicates. Their sentiments do not come from their hearts. Their insights is not in their character. Their speech does not represent their thoughts. Of them only their appearance is perceived. Until now I have seen a great many masks. When shall I see the faces of men? His moral repugnance at the masquerade of the big city was no mere metaphor. Rousseau's most sustaining assault on cosmopolitanism and his most passionate defense of a strict civic republicanism were provoked by the encyclopedist D'Alembert's suggestion that Geneva will benefit from having a theater. D'Alembert's argument was that civilized behavior could be learned from the pedagogic example of theatrical performances. To Rousseau, this was absurd and disgusting. The artifice evident in the performance of men, and especially women, about town, let alone the morals of actors and actresses, implied not refinement but corruption. The presentation of self in the cosmopolitan world of Paris did not allow an interior nature to express itself. It was an obstacle to open intersubjective relationships. In this drama, honesty and authenticity were sacrificed for the tawdry price of reputation. In a big city full of scheming, idle people without religion or principle, whose imagination, depraved by sloth, inactivity, the love of pleasure, and great needs, engenders only monsters and inspires only crimes. In a big city, mirrors and honor are nothing because each, easily hiding his conduct from the public eye, shows himself only by his reputation. To dispel this opacity and illegibility of others, Rousseau wanted to render social relations transparent. He would have liked all office holders to wear badges or emblems denoting their rank or position, so that at least there could be no doubt about what they were. In the big city, he fretted, how can you know who strangers really are if you cannot take their courtesies or even intimacies at face value? People meet me full of friendship. They show me 1,000 civilities. They render me services of all sorts. But that is precisely what I am complaining of. How can you become immediately the friend of a man whom you have never seen before? The true human interest, the displaying a noble effusion of an honest soul. This speaks a language far different from the insincere demonstrations of politeness and the false appearances which the customs of great world demand. It was to counteract the city's masquerade of false appearances that Rousseau was willing to endorse the imposition of a quite tyrannical transparency. Every citizen should forever be subject to the surveillance of government, to the gossip of women's circles, and to the inner voice of conscience. In an exemplary republican small town like Geneva, the authorities have everyone under their eye. Paradoxically, because individuals are always in the public eye, critics of one another from birth, they are freed from the pressure of public opinion, and so are better able to develop and grow. Stripped off their masks of fashion, artifice, and anonymity, people are forced back on their natural inner resources, and this provides a more fertile soil for the cultivation of good citizens. This then was the Rawlsian dream of transparency of the self to the self and to others that revolutionized European politics. It was the dream of a transparent society, visible and legible in each of its parts. The dream of there no longer existing any zones of darkness, zones established by the privileges of royal power to the prerogatives of some corporation, zones of disorder. It was the dream that each individual, whatever position he occupied, might be able to see the whole of society. That men's hearts should communicate their vision be unobstructed by obstacles, and that opinion of all reign over each. Foucault is no doubt right in this assessment of how Rousseau's will to transparency is related to the new phenomenon of governmentality, techniques of surveillance, a pastoral concern with the capacities of a population, and the force of public opinion all helped to shape the social and political terrain of the 19th century city. And yet, despite the tendency to totalitarianism in the fantasy of absolute transparency, it would be wrong to see only the infancy of Big Brother in Rousseau's response to the city, for contradictorily and no doubt despite himself, Rousseau was also a man about town. However vehemently he denounced Paris and loud Geneva, the story tells in the Confessions is of a callow youth who lives an emotionally and intellectually stifling provincial town, acquires his sentimental education through a series of adventures, and eventually makes his name in the capital city. Isn't this the blueprint for the Bildungsroman narrative of the 19th century? And doesn't it therefore entail a different image of the metropolis? Artificial and illegible it may be, but But for many, a young fictional hero, as for Rousseau, the big city offered a field of liberating possibilities. Here were the urban pleasures of squares and cafes, the chance encounters with strangers, the freedoms, the free zone of amorous adventure and political intrigue, the opportunity to make your reputation in the community of letters or the world of theater. Its anonymity could be cruel. Its dark zones could harbor hidden dangers, but the city at least allowed this space for self-formation and self-creation, for experimentation and change.